This week, something that had well and truly slipped under my radar, China's Black Mirror-style social credit system. So firstly, if you haven't seen the series Black Mirror, and I highly recommend you do watch it, basically it's a Twilight Zone-style look into the near future with a particular focus on technology and the possible dystopian outcomes it can produce. Each episode is a standalone story, some are better than others, but overall it's one of the best series I've seen in recent memory because it actually makes you think, which I don't think you can say about too many TV shows these days. Anyway, the first episode of the third series released late last year was called Nosedive. Here's the episode summary from TV.com. In the near future, society exists as an intricate system where people rate each other on everything. If your rating drops too low, then so does your life. Now, you may think that sounds a lot like real life already. We are consistently being rated and rating other people and things, particularly products and services. You have a credit rating. You're rated by how attractive you are. We have websites that rank hotel rooms, restaurants, and give book reviews. You can compare insurance policies, energy providers, and mortgage rates. If you're an Uber driver, you're constantly being rated by your customers in real time. On YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, you're rated by how many subscribers, friends, and followers you have, and the popularity of your videos, posts, and tweets. But in Nosedive, the rating system is ratcheted up to include every interaction you have in your life. For example, simply saying hello to someone in the street. If your hello is not enthusiastic enough, you might get a lower rating than you would like. Say something unpopular, then you're immediately downrated. Sounds like Twitter, doesn't it? Even simply buying a coffee, you rate the barista for his service and he rates you back for the way you interact with him. All of these day-to-day interactions are rated and go into your overall rating, which then affects everything from your ability to rent an apartment and hire a car to whether you get invited to a wedding. And I think the brilliance of Black Mirror is that it takes a technology or social phenomenon that already exists to some extent, then ratchets it up to a point that on the surface appears crazy, but at the same time entirely plausible. I mean, you may already be thinking from what I've described about Nosedive that it sounds like a kind of social justice warrior utopia, where if you step out of line by having the wrong opinion or even not displaying the requisite level of gratitude or cheeriness, then your entire life gets downgraded. And so the obvious conclusion for anyone that wants to get ahead in this world is to practice self-censorship by not saying anything even remotely controversial or negative and faking your way through life. There's a scene early in the episode where the female protagonist practices fake laughing in the mirror before she goes out and fakes her way through the day. Anyway, on to Big Brother China. Big data meets Big Brother as China moves to rate its citizens. The Chinese government plans to launch its social credit system in 2020. The aim? To judge the trustworthiness or otherwise of its 1.3 billion residents. On June 14, 2014, the State Council of China published an ominous-sounding document called Planning Outline for the Construction of a Social Credit System. In the way of Chinese policy documents, it was a lengthy and rather dry affair, but it contained a radical idea. What if there was a national trust score that rated the kind of citizen you were? Imagine a world where many of your daily activities were constantly monitored and evaluated. What you buy at the shops and online, where you are at any given time, who your friends are and how you interact with them, how many hours you spend watching content or playing video games, and what bills and taxes you pay or not. It's not hard to picture because most of that already happens thanks to all those data collecting behemoths like Google, Facebook, and Instagram, or health tracking apps such as Fitbit. But now imagine a system where all these behaviours are rated as either positive or negative and distilled into a single number according to rules set by the government. That would create your citizen score and it would tell everyone whether or not you were trustworthy. Plus, your rating would be publicly ranked against that of the entire population and used to determine your eligibility for a mortgage or a job, where your children can go to school, or even just your chances of getting a date. So this sounds like someone in the Chinese government watched Nosedive and thought it would be a great idea. A futuristic vision of Big Brother out of control? No, it's already getting underway in China, where the government is developing the social credit system to rate the trustworthiness of its 1.3 billion citizens. The Chinese government is pitching the system as a desirable way to measure and enhance trust nationwide and to build a culture of sincerity. As the policy states, it will forge a public opinion environment where keeping trust is glorious. It will strengthen sincerity in government affairs, commercial sincerity, social sincerity, and the construction of judicial credibility. Well, to me it sounds gloriously frightening, and it will produce the exact opposite of what is being advertised. Just like Black Mirror, it will produce conformity and insincerity because you won't dare step outside the prescribed opinion set, or your social credit will be diminished. Better to play along so you don't get ostracized, or worse still, vanished from existence. For now, technically, participating in China's citizen scores is voluntary, but by 2020 it will be mandatory. The behaviour of every single citizen and legal person, which includes every company or other entity in China, will be rated and ranked, whether they like it or not. Glorious. So the article goes on to talk about a couple of rating systems that are already used in China. One of them called Sesame Credit, run by Ant Financial Services Group, an affiliate company of Alibaba. And here's how their rating system works. Individuals on Sesame Credit are measured by a score ranging between 350 and 950 points. Alibaba does not divulge the complex algorithm it uses to calculate the number, but they do reveal the 5 factors taken into account. The first is credit history. For example, does the citizen pay their electricity or phone bill on time? Next is fulfillment capacity, which it defines in its guidelines as a user's ability to fulfill his or her contract obligations. The third factor is personal characteristics, verifying personal information such as someone's mobile phone number and address. But the fourth category, behaviour and preference, is where it gets interesting. Under this system, something as innocuous as a person's shopping habits become a measure of character. Alibaba admits it judges people by the types of products they buy. Someone who plays video games for 10 hours a day, for example, would be considered an idle person. Someone who frequently buys diapers would be considered as probably a parent who, on balance, is more likely to have a sense of responsibility. So the system not only investigates behaviour, it shapes it. It nudges citizens away from purchases and behaviours the government does not like. Friends matter too. The fifth category is interpersonal relationships. What does their choice of online friends and their interactions say about the person being assessed? Sharing what Sesame Credit refers to as positive energy online, nice messages about the government or how well the country's economy is doing, will make your score go up. Of course it will. Praise your overlords and get social credit for it. And although it's not mandatory yet, millions of people have already signed up. Why? Because they can get access to all kinds of goodies. For example, if you attain a score of 600, you can take out a loan of 5,000 yuan to shop online, as long as it's at an Alibaba site, of course. 650 points and you can rent a car without leaving a deposit. They're also entitled to faster check-in at hotels and use of the VIP check-in at Beijing Capital International Airport. Those with more than 666 points can get a cash loan of up to 50,000 yuan, obviously from Ant Financial Services. Get above 700 and they can apply for Singapore travel without supporting documents such as an employee letter. And at 750 they get fast-tracked application to a coveted pan-European Schengen visa. I think the best way to understand the system is as a sort of bastard love child of a loyalty scheme. Now, of course, a lot of this is based on having a good credit rating and paying your bills on time. So it's not much different to having a good credit rating or an Amex Gold card or equivalent, but it's the behavioural aspect that's scary. Sesame Credit already offers tips to help individuals improve their ranking, including warning about the downsides of friending someone who has a low score, or in other words, the wrong opinions or bad credit. Indeed, the government's social credit system is basically a big data gamified version of the Communist Party's surveillance methods, the disquieting Dang An. The regime kept a dossier on every individual that tracked political and personal transgressions. As citizens, Dang An followed them for life, from schools to jobs. People started reporting on friends and even family members, raising suspicion and lowering social trust in China. The same thing will happen with digital dossiers. People will have an incentive to say to their friends and family, don't post that. I don't want you to hurt your score, but I also don't want you to hurt mine. Now, I know the phrase is overused today, but this is truly Orwellian. But it gets even worse. Currently, Sesame Credit does not directly penalise people for being untrustworthy. It's more effective to lock people in with treats for good behaviour. But Hu Tao, Sesame Credit's chief manager, warns people that the system is designed so that untrustworthy people can't rent a car, can't borrow money, or even can't find a job. She's even disclosed that Sesame Credit has approached China's Education Bureau about sharing a list of its students who cheated on national examinations in order to make them pay into the future for their dishonesty. And again, not being able to borrow money because you have a terrible credit history is no bad thing. If you're in the business of lending, then you want to lend to people who you know have a good chance of paying you back. But it's the possibility of being excluded from obtaining a loan because you have the wrong opinions. That is truly frightening. Penalties are set to change dramatically when the government system becomes mandatory in 2020. Indeed, on September 25, 2016, the State Counsel General Office updated its policy entitled Warning and Punishment Mechanisms for Persons Subject to Enforcement for Trust Breaking. The overriding principle is simple. If trust is broken in one place, restrictions are imposed everywhere. The policy document states, for instance, people with low ratings will have slower internet speeds, restricted access to restaurants, nightclubs or golf courses, and the removal of the right to travel freely abroad with, I quote, restrictive control on consumption within holiday areas or travel businesses. Scores will influence a person's rental applications, their ability to get insurance or a loan, and even social security benefits. Citizens with low scores will not be hired by certain employers and will be forbidden from obtaining some jobs, including in the civil service, journalism, and legal fields, where of course you must be deemed trustworthy. Well, not in the West. Low-rating citizens will also be restricted when it comes to enrolling themselves or their children in high-paying private schools. And it appears the author was aware of how ludicrous this all sounds when he says, I'm not fabricating this list of punishments, it's the reality Chinese citizens will face. As the government document states, the social credit system will allow the trustworthy to roam everywhere under heaven while making it hard for the discredited to take a single step. China's trust system might be voluntary as yet, but it's already having consequences. In February 2017, the country's Supreme People's Court announced that 6.15 million of its citizens had been banned from taking flights over the past 4 years for social misdeeds. The ban is being pointed to as a step toward blacklisting in the SCS. We have signed a memorandum with over 44 government departments in order to limit discredited people on multiple levels, says Meng Jiang, head of the Executive Department of the Supreme Court. Another 1.65 million blacklisted people cannot take trains. So if you thought Black Mirror's episode Nosedive was some sort of crazy aberration, think again. This is really happening right now in China and will become mandatory in 2020. Now, you could dismiss this by saying, well, this is China, it's a communist, top-down, authoritarian state, and this is just another way of trying to exercise control over your population. And that's true, but we have a milder version of this playing out in the Western world. But it's not so much directed by the state, but facilitated by huge social media companies like Google, Facebook, and Twitter. But then the state, in some circumstances, is using people's social media posts to go after them for wrongthink, which of course has similar implications for employment and other prospects as it does in China. Then we have these social outrage campaigns threatening to boycott advertisers if they don't stop supporting certain people or brands. One miscalculated joke on Twitter and your career and social life is over. The former Human Rights Commissioner here in Australia lamented the fact that people could say whatever they like around their own kitchen tables. The point is, there's no shortage of authoritarians in Western societies trying to police speech, prescribe behaviour, and punish you for stepping out of line. Now, rather than end on a paranoid vision of the future controlled by authoritarians, I wanted to offer an anecdote that was recently relayed to me at the Milo Press Q&A event at Parliament House. I sat next to a middle-aged guy who brought his 3 sons, aged 13, 15 and 18, all big fans of Milo. He told me that they'd lived in China for about 10 years previously and that his sons and the kids they went to school with had developed a code or way of speaking about things they weren't officially allowed to talk about. When it was discovered what the students were doing, the authorities, in this case the schools, would crack down on that behaviour and speech. But the kids would then just develop a new system of code to talk about those taboo topics. Now, what's the point of that story? Well, I think it says something about the natural human instinct for truth and freedom, that the truth will come out no matter how hard you try to suppress it. But that's not an excuse for complacency, or as many have suggested, to just wait for the politically correct control freaks to devour themselves. Because as history instructs us, authoritarian regimes can wreak enormous damage and suffering in the interim. I'll see you next time.